Hello, it's Lynn Watts here with Wyatt the Wonder Dog Books. And today I'm going to be talking about integrity. And in particular, I'm going to talk about how integrity helps to develop resilience. But first, let's talk about integrity and what it is. So, integrity is not just being honest, although that is certainly a part of it. But integrity means doing the right thing even when no one is looking. And the other really important part of that is that it's doing the right thing when no one is looking because that is who you are and that is what you value. So, really, what we're talking about here when we talk about integrity is more complicated than just being honest. It's also talking about values, it's about talking about helping students develop an inner compass that gives them direction all the time in every situation, regardless of where they might find themselves and what kind of pressure they might be under. So it's way, way more than just following rules. It's beginning to understand what's behind the rules. Why do we have rules like that? So I know, especially at the beginning of the school year, we spend a lot of time talking about what are the rules? What are the rules in the school? What are the rules in our classroom? Um, and I think sometimes we do that and just kind of put the rules out there, perhaps even talk about the consequences of not following rules, but we don't always talk about why those rules are important. Why do they come about? So if you have a rule that you have to raise your hand before you speak out in class, why do you have that rule? Because it's being respectful of other students, it's being respectful of the teacher in the room. It means that you wait your turn to talk and that you're respectful when other people are talking. If you just talk over them, that's not being very respectful and that's not valuing them. So, this is why I think it's important anytime we teach rules, things like being honest and telling the truth, and other things like being responsible. We teach not only what that looks like, but the reason behind the importance of that. So, teaching integrity becomes much more complicated than just teaching some simple rules. So, why does that build resilience? Well, I think you can see that if a student has an inner compass, it helps give them direction even in very difficult and hard times. It helps them bounce back when times are very stressful. And it also helps develop relationships because if you have integrity, then you're respectful of other people, of their needs, and your values show that. So I do think that in terms of teaching integrity, it's important to also teach what it is not. So just as we want to teach what it is and what is the reasoning behind it, the concept behind it, we also want to teach what it is not. So it is not being perfect all the time. It does not mean following rules and following what you're told to do, in other words, being obedient without understanding. So the understanding part is important. It's not just following rules for the sake of following rules. There needs to be thoughtful choice and critical thinking in there. It doesn't mean never changing your mind. You certainly can um, in a situation understand things differently. You can develop different perspectives. You can develop understanding of other people. So it doesn't mean never changing your mind. And here's another one that I think we perhaps don't emphasize enough. It's not doing the right thing for a reward. I think many times we get into these kind of programs, especially in schools, where there is some sort of reward, whether it's at the end of the day, whether it's the end of the month, the end of the school year, and there is some reward for doing the right thing, for integrity, for following the rules, for all of these things that are important. And when we do that, we diminish the rule itself, or we diminish the concept, the value itself, because it becomes something that if you don't get a reward for it, then a child, even an adult, doesn't understand the need to do it, and there's no motivation to follow through. So, what are some practical ways? I'm going to go through these pretty quickly in terms of how to help students develop integrity. One is to praise honesty even when it's hard. So when a student is honest and say, I forgot or I didn't do it, to praise the fact that they were honest about it and did not make up some excuse. I think it's important to teach integrity moments and to point them out, not necessarily the student, him or herself, but rather simply here's an important uh, situation where someone has a choice of doing this or doing that. And what do you think they ought to do? Why would you want to do that? What's going to be the consequence of following through and doing that? So you can do this through videos, you can do it in books and stories that you're reading, you can do it in real life situations. Um, one of the things that I really like is using reflective questions. So helping students to develop these kinds of questions that they can learn to ask themselves. And here are some very good ones. When given a challenging, questionable, critical situation, you can say to a child, what kind of person do you want to be right now? So we're not talking just about the rule. What is it that you should do? But rather, who do you want to be? And in that sense, of course, we're talking about values. Here's another one. What choice that you make will you feel proud of later? When you look back on this and think about what you decide to do, what will make you feel proud? Okay. You could also ask the other way around. What will you have regrets about? All right. So, kind of that future thinking. What will your future self think and say and feel about this? And finally, helping students to develop empathy by asking, what if the roles were reversed? What if you were in this situation? What would you want to see happen? All right. So, developing that empathy and that ability to think about others. And here's the uh, final and fourth one is create a mistake, repair, growth kind of a framework. All right. So that it's okay to make a mistake. We all make mistakes. But once you make a mistake, what do you do next? You repair. All right. You repair the relationship. You tell the truth. You make up for, the action in some way. And then finally, how did you grow from that? So mistake, growth, repair. Acknowledging what happened, repairing any harm that came out of it, and finally reflecting back on how it could be done differently. So, integrity, I think you would agree, is a really important concept. And we have many, many opportunities as counselors, as parents, as educators to teach students about integrity. As always, thanks so much for all that you do in the lives of children, and thanks for listening.